Was Tsunoda's sanction in Abu Dhabi really fair? Or was it just the tip of the iceberg of a sports conspiracy that ended his Formula One career? The 2025 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was to be the perfect closing to an unforgettable season. 3 drivers still had a mathematical chance of winning the World Championship: Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and Max Verstappen. Yas Marina, a circuit that has historically been the scene of tense finishes, was about to witness a titanic battle. However, the focus was completely diverted when an unexpected name emerged in the midst of the chaos: Yuki Tsunoda. Lap number 23 of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix would be remembered as one of the most controversial of the entire season. It was a key moment in the development of the career. The leaders had already completed their first pit stops, and the race pace was beginning to stabilize. In this context, Yuki Tsunoda was riding on hard tires, within an extended strategy for his first stint. In sporting terms, his pace was not competitive, but his position on the track became strategic. He was just ahead of Lando Norris, who had just rejoined with fresh tires and was making an aggressive comeback. It was then that the maneuver that sparked the controversy occurred. Tsunoda, knowing that Norris was approaching with DRS activated, began to zigzag in the middle of the straight between turns 5 and 6. This area of the Yas Marina circuit is not only one of the fastest sections on the calendar, but also one of the most sensitive to slipstream. The combination of high speed, strong braking, and lateral proximity between the cars makes it a very high-risk sector. And Tsunoda, far from facilitating the passage as a pilot would do outside of a direct fight, opted for an aggressive defense that not only contradicted the regulations, but bordered on the reckless. The initial movement was to the left, seeking to close the interior line. Immediately afterwards, the number 22 car moved to the right, cutting off Norris's slipstream. But the most serious thing came when Tsunoda changed direction again, this time returning to the left side just when Norris had already compromised his overtaking maneuver. The McLaren driver's reaction was instinctive, steering off the track, going off with all 4 wheels and hitting the grass at more than 300 kilometers per hour. A miscalculation at that moment would not have only ended in a penalty, but potentially in an accident with serious consequences. The frame-by-frame analysis of the onboard cameras left little room for the Japanese driver's defense. It was not a single defensive maneuver as the regulations allow, but rather multiple changes in trajectory that forced a dangerous evasion. Furthermore, the sequence of radio messages revealed that it was not an improvised act. His engineer warned him clearly, Norris behind, with good pace, expected to enter DRS. And Tsunoda's response was sharp and definitive, "I know what to do, leave it to me." A phrase that would go down in the history of modern F1 not for its audacity, but for its unconsciousness. This exchange, far from reflecting the confidence of a pilot in control, evidenced a personal decision to execute an aggressive defense, outside any logical safety protocol. From that moment on, the discussion stopped being technical and became ethical. Is such a defense justifiable when you know that your car is not competing for points or key positions? Is it acceptable to risk another driver who is risking a championship with an action that borders on unsportsmanlike? Tsunoda was not defending his position out of personal pride. He did it as part of a larger structure where his role was not to win but to interfere. And that fact, more than any telemetry data, made his maneuver indefensible. It was a symbol of how far the rules can be stretched to favor the interests of a team, even if that means putting the physical integrity of rivals at risk. Sport, at that moment, became hostage to strategy, and Tsunoda, his most visible executor. To fully understand what happened to Tsunoda in Abu Dhabi, you have to go beyond the maneuver and read between the lines. Because what was experienced that Sunday was not simply a poorly executed defense or a lack of judgment behind the wheel. It was clearly a strategic move with a greater objective, to protect Red Bull's interests in the fight for the title, even at the expense of one of its own drivers. And this is where the uncomfortable question arises. Was Yuki Tsunoda deliberately sacrificed in a team tactic designed to hinder McLaren? Everything indicates yes. Tsunoda did not have the pace to compete on equal terms, nor was he involved in the fight for important points. His strategy with hard tires at the start of the race did not respond to optimizing his own performance, but rather to extend his stopping window as much as possible. Because it coincided exactly with the reinstatement of Lando Norris after his pit stop. The timing was perfect. While Red Bull's strategic leaders kept Verstappen with a clear track, the number 22 car became a moving obstacle just when McLaren needed clean air to attack. And this is not an empty conspiracy theory. The radios confirmed it. In the turns leading up to the incident, His engineer was indicating in an almost calculated manner when Norris would be within the DRS window, anticipating the ideal moment to apply pressure. But not sporting pressure, but tactical pressure. Instead of letting it go without compromising his career, as usually happens when a driver knows he is out of the fight, Tsunoda adopted an extreme defensive stance. Not to defend his position, but to slow down a direct rival of Verstappen at a decisive moment. The most alarming thing is that, in retrospect, everything fits together. The plan was executed with surgical precision, entering the track at the exact moment, defense to the limit of the regulations, and a driver willing or forced to execute without question. What should have been just another race to close out the year turned into a dramatic essay on how modern Formula One allows team tactics to eat away at any vestige of sportsmanship when the championship is at stake. Tsunoda did not fail. He did exactly what was expected of him. The problem is that, in that obedience, he lost more than 5 seconds. He lost his place. It lost its legitimacy. And perhaps he also lost his future. The hours that followed the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix were marked by a climate of confusion, speculation, and growing tension within Red Bull. The 5-second penalty for Tsunoda, accompanied by the added point to his super license, initially seemed like a simple regulatory adjustment after a dangerous maneuver. However, what happened next made it clear that the penalty was only the surface of a deeper and more forceful restructuring. The leak of the official FIA report generated an immediate impact within the organization, revealing that the problem had not been solely an isolated action by the Japanese driver, but a combination of internal communication failures, aggressive strategic decisions, and a shared responsibility that the team management attempted to handle with surgical speed. Tsunoda went from being a supporting player in the race to becoming the epicenter of an internal earthquake. The FIA had recorded in its report the dangerousness of the maneuver, pointing directly to the fact that Car 22 not only made multiple changes of direction, but also effectively forced Lando Norris to leave the track to avoid a collision. Beyond the sporting penalty, this verdict had a devastating symbolic weight. It formalized that Tsunoda had exceeded acceptable driving limits, and it did so at a time when his future within Red Bull was already being questioned after a start to the season with poor performance and multiple inconsistencies. The added penalty point brought his total to 8 within a 12-month period, leaving him dangerously close to automatic suspension. This data was not minor. Within the paddock, the idea began to circulate that Red Bull had lost confidence in its ability to manage pressure at crucial moments. The incident not only damaged the driver's image, but also reinforced the perception that Tsunoda was a risk within a team that needed technical and mental stability to face a season that was becoming complicated on multiple fronts. What was surprising was the speed with which Red Bull acted. Just a few hours after the close of the Grand Prix, clear signs emerged that management believed Tsunoda had compromised both his reputation and the operational integrity of the team. The internal meetings took place in a tense atmosphere, and they discussed not only the Abu Dhabi incident, but also the driver's behavior throughout the season, his difficulty adapting to the RB21, and the multiple criticisms he had received from key figures within the organization. One of the most repeated questions at the end of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was not why Tsunoda was sanctioned, but why Lando Norris was not sanctioned. The images were clear. The McLaren driver completed his overtaking outside the limits of the track, with all 4 wheels off the asphalt, which in other contexts has been almost automatically penalized. So why on this occasion did the commissioners decide not to take action against him? The answer, according to the FIA, is not only in the regulations, but also in the contextual interpretation that is made of the sporting rules when the action has been forced by another infraction. The legal key that the FIA used to justify its decision is in the doctrine already consolidated in previous seasons. When a driver is forced to leave the track due to an illegal maneuver by his rival, it is not considered that he is obtaining an unfair advantage by overtaking outside the limits. In this case, the stewards determined that Norris was forced off the track by Tsunoda's multiple defenses, which broke the fundamental principle of the regulations that allows only one defensive change of direction per straightaway. The number 22 car not only failed to comply with this rule, but also put Norris in a position in which continuing on the track would have posed the risk of a collision. That is to say, Norris did not choose to leave. He had no other option. However, this explanation did not completely appease the criticism. In the hours after the race, analysts, former drivers and commentators such as Martin Brundle, Jolyon Palmer and Nico Rosberg expressed their discomfort with what they considered an inconsistent application of the regulations. Brundle, in particular, was clear in saying that, if you are going to allow someone to gain an off-track position even if it is forced, then the message you are sending is that it is better to risk being penalized for defending, because the overtaker will not be penalized. This ambiguity in interpretation reopens an old debate within the Formula One ecosystem. Is the regulation being applied with the same criteria for all drivers and teams? Because although in technical terms the FIA's decision may be legally supported, in public perception there is a growing sense of arbitrariness. When it comes to drivers who are fighting for the championship, like Norris, and a sanction that has been applied in other less relevant cases is omitted, the inevitable suspicion is that there is favoritism or at least hidden priorities. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.